Because I've got you, I've got you. You're looking at the stars and you feel it in your heart.
My name is Luke Logerman and I work for the Unified Music Group. For those who don't know us, we're a multi-service music company that works across artist management, recorded music, merchandise, touring and events. While our company is diverse in the music and artists we work with, our roots are based in the heavy music world, which is what I wanted to speak on today. Out of the many hats that I wear for the company, my key role is running our flagship record label, UNFD. UNFD is a globally renowned label that started just 10 years ago and has already released over 150 albums from artists all over the world. And just last year, we had over 237 million audio streams. UNFD has become an institution for heavy music fans, particularly in Australia, where UNFD has spawned our festival, the Unify Gathering, the touring company Unify Presents, and our merchandise company, 2400. So as a company, and for our artists, we are always looking to connect with our audience in authentic and meaningful ways. Our mailing lists reach over 200,000 subscribers, while our collective social media reach is 3 times that. UNFD Social Club is an online forum established in 2019 that now has over 5,000 members and is the go-to forum for people in the heavy music industry. So I'm here today to tell you why I think this community is a great place for brands to connect with fans that are loyal and intelligent, and these fans will support brands that support the artists they love and identify with the values they hold. So I want to play a quick video as well to illustrate some of the stuff we do. So what is heavy music? Basically, it's an umbrella term that is used to cover a wide spectrum of music. There's a lot of different genres and subgenres we could go into, and I could try and explain to you the difference between emo, metalcore, post-hardcore, or even post-gothic shout metal, but I'm not sure it even matters. What does matter is that the fan base of this genre is growing rapidly, and it has been growing rapidly for the last 2 decades. So in the 2000s, Parkway Drive and the Amity Affliction were the only Australian artists who were able to sell tickets to thousands of fans. If you fast forward to 2021, while those 2 bands are arena acts, there are many other artists that can sell over 1,000 tickets in multiple Australian cities. These acts are now touring the globe, where audiences all over Europe, America, and Asia recognize Australia as a global hotspot for all things heavy. Despite the aggressive vocals and the loud guitars, these artists are constantly entering the ARIA charts and playing major festivals. In the past 6 years, more than 25 heavy artists have made it onto rotation on Triple J, and recently sports networks have started using this music to promote their products. But there's also a lot of great businesses that thrive on the heavy music community. This slide here shows our suite of companies on the left, while on the right you can see just some of the dozens of businesses that now support and are supported by this ever-growing industry. And they include record labels, touring companies, magazines, digital radio stations, venues, and of course, festivals. Some of the leading Australian music festivals in Australia that cater to heavy music audience are bringing in tens of thousands of punters and highlight Australian music content all the way up to the top of their lineups. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my own label, UNFD, which has had continued success in the last decade working with artists and fans of one of the most loyal communities in the world. This slide here is a little bit of a flex, but you can see the data in here shows a really, really successful and healthy scene within our country. So who is this audience? For one, it is trending towards being more diverse. While traditionally thought of as a mostly male audience, we've watched this change over recent years as the audience continues to be represented by more non-male fans. Over 75% of the audience is aged 18 to 34, and it's an audience that doesn't grow out of the music they love. This community is hyper-engaged. They thrive on connection. Well over 50% of our surveyed fans admitting they'd formed significant new relationships through being involved in this music scene. Those relationships ranging from festival buddies to lifelong partners. It's an audience that isn't connected only by music, but also engage and drive influence around social issues, particularly around mental health awareness, stomping out bullying, environmental issues, and sustainability. And our research shows that over 60% of fans consider a brand's position on these issues before purchasing. Over 70% would support a brand that simply supports their favorite artist, and that number jumps to 90% if that brand then also aligned with their values. So what we've done is we've put together a panel of people that we feel can help us unpack their experiences working with niche and non-mainstream music communities and how we can start to form brand loyalty within them. How you doing, guys? You sick of me talking yet? Because I kind of am. But I'm just going to quickly do a bit of an intro note for everybody here so we can save a little bit of time. So Lilith Jackman is the director of CEA, which is a specialist independent brand partnerships agency delivering artist and talent services to brands. In her work, she has helped connect brands with a bunch of incredible artists such as Angus Stone, Thelma Plum, G-Flip, Hooligan Hefts, Winston Surfshirt, and Vera Blue, among many others. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We have Andy Miller. Andy is the co-founder of non-alcoholic beer company Heaps Normal and spent the last 15 years as a strategist obsessed with cultural change. He previously led brand and marketing strategy for several brands and festivals in Australia, China, including Young Henry's, Triple J, SBS Absolute, and Volkswagen. And I love your beer. I had one in the office on Friday and it was absolutely delicious, if I do say so. Jane does a lot of things. Jane has worked in the electronic and dance music industry since 1994. For almost 3 decades, she has worked in a variety of roles, including artist manager, booking agent, programmer, promoter, publicist, and tour manager. Today, Jane is artist manager for Sampology and runs his label imprint Middle Name Records with him. She's also the director and executive producer of EMC, the annual conference and festival focused on electronic music. She is the director of Vibe Lab and co-founder of nighttime economy-focused initiative Global Cities After Dark. Jane currently sits on the board of Music New South Wales and is acting vice chair on the Board Association of Artist Managers. You're a really busy person. And finally, we have Jake Taylor, who is the vocalist and manager of Australian metalcore band In Heart's Wake, who have released 4 consecutive top 5 ARIA albums and have spent over a decade promoting social and environmental issues through their music. Jake also runs an eco-clothing brand called Earthwalker, which have planted over 21,000 trees worldwide, and is in the process of producing a documentary called Green is the New Black, which is about a metal band's journey towards environmental sustainability. So I'll kick off with you, Lilith. If you can just speak to, when brands are looking to engage musicians, what's the first thing they're looking for?
Look, I think it's many things, but the common thread often is they're looking to tap into new audiences with engaged following and also remain culturally relevant to their existing audiences. They're looking to promote their philosophy and their product, and traditionally they've relied on influencer marketing, and more what we're seeing is that it's traditional influencer marketing is becoming more saturated, so organic partnerships are becoming more, they're seeing more value in those.
Awesome. And what kind of those campaigns have you been able to get off the ground with non-mainstream artists? I mean, we've obviously seen the great massive stuff you've been able to do, but have you got any kind of examples of trying to tap into these kinds of audiences?
Yeah, so we've done a few campaigns. A couple of notable ones are in recent times. We worked with Zimmerman and delivered 4 artist services to Zimmerman. It was Johnny Hunter, Stephen, Azuri Ryder, and East. And it was incredible because these artists were able to work with a really high caliber brand. And for Zimmerman, it was really cool because they were able to be seen as a tastemaker, with their audiences. So it was an incredible campaign. Another couple, Hooligan Hefts and G-Flip for Russell Athletic, and Hooligan Hefts for Culture Kings. Those brands jumped on board when the artist Hooligan Hefts was, growing his audiences, and they're still, with in partnership with the artist, who now has an incredible statistics and engagement. And I guess it just begs the question: what really is non-mainstream? What is niche? I think it's a really interesting debate about what that really means.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I was kind of getting at with the early stuff that we're saying, is that so many niche communities are having so much success that, I mean, if there's 8,000 people attending a concert, is that really that niche, or is that really that non-mainstream? Because it seems pretty mainstream to me. So I wanted to quickly go to Andy. I mean, I wanted to just find out a bit more about Heaps Normal. So being from the punk scene, I've got a lot of friends who don't drink. They always say that, up to the age of 30, people always ask, are you straight edge? But once they reach the age of 30, people ask if they're in recovery. So how important was it for you guys to be able to, I guess, normalize, non-alcoholic beer?
Yeah, I mean, it's those kinds of conversations, I think, that we all find really boring, and that has been something as part of our mission to eliminate those conversations. When you're going out, to be able to have a night off the booze, or spread out your drinks a little bit and not have to actually answer questions about why. I think for all of us, we've experienced those moments that are quite often the reasons why we end up caving in, or not sticking to what we actually want to do, the decisions we want to make for ourselves. So I think, that's sort of what's inspired it.
And I can definitely speak to that being the case in the music industry. So how important has the music community been, to try and support from Heaps Normal, or to be involved in that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we've seen, in our collective experience across hospitality and music, is that musicians and bartenders and chefs, it's harder for them more than anyone. They're on the front lines of, what is a pretty broken drinking culture in Australia and elsewhere. And so, we were very much, Heaps Normal was very much inspired by those industries and that experience where, if you go to the bar after a gig, you're going to, you're gigging like night on night. And if you go to the bar and somebody wants to buy you a beer and you say no, you're not saying no to the beer, you're saying no to the social interaction. And, and so people, that's why I think people end up, caving in and saying, oh, whatever, I'll have another one. And so for us, we just wanted to create a great tasting beer that, just happens to be non-alcoholic, doesn't scream zero, doesn't scream I'm sober, doesn't push that as kind of something that, is the end goal for everybody. It just makes it, that little bit easier just to, drink a bit less, and that's, what we've kind of made it for ourselves in that way as well.
That's awesome. Jane, so how would you describe the electronic music audience? I know that's such a broad question, but just to give a couple of tidbits there.
In a very similar way that you did it, describe the heavy music audience. Actually, it's really, if you look at electronic and dance music as this kind of umbrella genre, and then underneath that is a pretty huge list of subgenres. I know in terms of my hat that I wear as a label manager, when we're ingesting a new single, it's always like the choice between the primary genre and the secondary genre, and then the subgenres, and it's a pretty long list these days. And so if you think of that in terms of this context of niche scenes, movements, focused communities, each of those kind of subgenres will have its own community there. And sure, there's going to be crossover between some of the communities, but there's also going to be a significant part of those kind of micro audiences that are really highly passionate about that particular sound, that particular scene. And I think that actually presents a really amazing opportunity for brands to really kind of enter into those spaces. Firstly, probably for far less budget than it would take to kind of have a real impact in a mainstream space, but secondly also to really deepen that meaningful connection to a smaller audience.
Awesome. And have there been many effective brand collaborations within that world of music?
I mean, the really obvious and one that I probably have the most respect for is Red Bull. That what they've done in this space over consistency over decades. If you just look at their Red Bull Music Academy, which sadly doesn't exist anymore, but it did for 20 years, and the way that they invested in emerging artists that were a bit on the fringe, artists that were more experimental, but that was just an incredible program, and it was, my mind
Sounds great. So Jake, how would you then describe the average in Hearts Wake fan, and what do you think is important to them?
Oh, big question. They have a lot of heart, without a doubt, and they really, really care about the world, I would think. Back when I started in this genre, I felt like I was an outcast in a room of outcasts, and we all had that in common, this uniting and this bond, and it was really empowering to have that. And so I feel like metal, hardcore, punk, rock and roll, all these genres stem from, not conforming to the status quo, almost that rebellion and calling in change. So it really speaks to that demographic because I think ultimately it supports all of us because right now at the forefront of that conversation is the earth. Will we have a future on the earth? And so a huge way, like when you go to a sports game or you go to your favorite sporting team, you want to buy or pick up something that represents that, like a flag or a t-shirt or a jersey. And so our fans, it's really important to them to be part of that. And so we've done a whole bunch of eco merchandise, eco products. We've even done some eco wines and eco candles and all kinds of things. And that's where we choose to invest our time into those sorts of things. And where our fans spend their money is ultimately their vote. Yeah.
So metal kids like candles too. That's the message I'm taking from this one here.
That's right.
So there's only certain amounts of revenue streams, I guess, for an independent artist as well. And you, at the moment, are producing a documentary called Green is the New Black. Can you tell us about how you tried to approach some funding for some brands, which I think they're still looking for funding, but what your approach was being to do that?
Yeah. So basically put a pitch together and about this concept of a metal band's journey towards sustainability. And it happened at a really unfortunate time in the music industry when, COVID was very basically bringing down all expenditures for businesses not wanting to be at risk. So I basically started filling out grants, and I got really lucky with the first two I've ever filled out. And so now I'm creating that documentary, and it's super interesting space to be looking into all the ways we can offset and create things. And yeah, I would love there to be an easier way to find an accessibility with other brands that want to be part of that mission. That would be really fantastic. And this is the main stage, so yeah, let's do it.
That's it. I guess that's why we're here. All right, cool. Well, now we've introduced you all. Everyone's gotten to know you a little bit better. I wanted to get a bit of a discussion going, and I'll kind of start with you, Lilith, but just to talk about how brands actually, connect with artists. I think, especially when you're looking at a non-mainstream kind of audience, the reputation might be that this is hard to penetrate, or there might be creative or ethical differences because this is the way we do things. So from the start, what does the agency kind of do to try and navigate that kind of stuff?
Look, there are a couple of ways. Oftentimes, sort of we group these ideas in sort of two parts. One is where a campaign or an idea has already been created by the brand, and a brief is sent to us or to the artist. And a lot of our work goes into working with the brand who's created the brief and the idea and the concept to work within the parameters and to allow as much creative freedom as possible for an artist, which makes it more aligned and more authentic to the artist. Sometimes that's possible and there's flexibility within those parameters. Sometimes it's not. In terms of ethical misalignments, we don't, those are no-go zones. We obviously respect the boundaries of our artists, and brands have rarely tried to push those. But creative misalignments, sometimes we can work. We find ways to work within them. Sometimes it just doesn't work, and we use those moments to educate brands on what they need to do and how they need to create campaigns so that it has the artist at the forefront of their mind, rather than a piece of the puzzle that fits into the overall picture. And the second way in which partnerships work is we create the concept with artists' passion points, as Jake said, in mind, and then we pitch to the brand that idea, having regard to what value can the brand obtain by being part of that. So being culturally relevant, being a tastemaker, and those types of things, aside from the statistical analysis and the data.
Yeah. It sounds like it's actually important to have somebody representing those things, and I imagine a lot of artist managers don't actually have that experience, and so it's great to have someone that's on the kind of on the music side, but also as a link between the two. That's great to know. Andy, is there like anything that you've ever had, like in terms of like working with artists where you guys have had an idea that they didn't want to do, or like how do you build trust, I guess, between the music community and a brand?
Yeah, I was just thinking about while Lil was talking then. I think a really good place to start is asking yourself what world do you share with the artist that you want to work with? Do you share a world at all, and do you share an audience with that artist? Because I think there's no point in my opinion of just trying to go after the biggest, coolest artist that you can think of. You're going to get much better results if you actually start from a point of view of working with somebody who you have a shared audience with, but who there might be another audience that you don't cross over with, that you can expand into with that artist. I think in all of the projects that I've been involved in, that's been the starting point, and I think it's been I guess a kind of that fundamental question that's helped make sure that there have been authentic relationships, because it's not an unnatural link, whether it's sort of Young Henrys and DZ Death Rays, or whether it's Heaps Normal and Isolated Music Festival. There's always been a natural link there, and a reason why we've actually been kicking off that relationship.
Yeah, great. Jane, in your experience, is your audience fairly open to collaboration? Do you think that the brands get anything out of working with artists within that kind of audience?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think from both a brand and an artist, or it could be a community that the brand's wanting to kind of embed with and align with. I think there needs to be like time and care taken on both sides, like working in more specific niche spaces these are not the kinds of spaces that a brand can kind of have a quick win and come in and piss off again. It's like it's really about kind of having the brand and the community it's almost like the brand is coming into the community as a part of the community. So that takes time, and that takes care, and that's a kind of a longer game. So I think communities are definitely open to it. I think too, since COVID, much more so, and I think there's actually a really great opportunity, because we've seen state governments and even federal government and local governments being really forthcoming with new cultural relief grant funding. So there's been a lot more buoyancy in that grant space than we've ever seen before, and that presents a really amazing opportunity for the private to come in with the public funding to kind of really help to create impact, not just in those communities, but actually really impact the whole kind of ecosystem as well.
Yeah, awesome. There's a certain energy drink that I'd kind of seen that had gone into a lot of sort of metal festivals, and then they were giving guitar straps and everything out to people backstage. They actually had an issue where people didn't want to actually drink the energy drink ever. So they ended up actually creating water bottles that had water in them, and it looked like the can of the drink, so that when the bands are on stage, they would sit there and drink it. And that kind of just like, what that kind of evokes for me is that this is not a brand that is actually, should be kind of connected with these artists if the artists don't even actually want to consume the brand. And I guess just going to that with you as an artist, Jake, how important is it to you guys that your values would align with any brand that you'd be willing to promote? And then having said that, once you found the right brand, how much would you guys actually be willing to go out there and talk to it?
It's to us, especially in environmental and social space, super, super important. It's everything. Brands like, Patagonia, Fens, Flow Hive, these kind of brands that have the ethics at their core about the world and about a better future for all is kind of where we're aligned, and it really looking at it as a whole process where planet, product, platform, people, everyone wins, and that to me is kind of the future, because that's how we can all succeed, because then it's set up for sustainability and business can be successful. So those are the brands I'd love to work with, and how I would rep them, how we would support them. No artist wants to do 4 easy payments of $9.95, no one wants to do that. So for me, it'd just be natural and organic. I mean, for instance, like this shirt is just made of hemp, but I'm wearing it not because I was told to, because it's comfortable. So I feel like those sort of things, they're authentic when you really like embody that brand. So finding that alignment, very, very, very important. And yeah, it's like family. You want them to win and they want you to win, so you support each other.
Awesome. So guys, say we found a brand, they've decided, you know, this is a certain demographic, certain music audience that we're really into trying to connect with. How long would it take them to actually try and get themselves into a new world of music, start branding? I mean, you talked about how it needs to take a little while to feel authentic. How long? Like, how much investment is there in this?
I think, just to take a step back from that one, I think there's a really interesting thing around that concept of, you know, authenticity and engagement. Like, what is engagement now? You know, is engagement chucking an emoji on a comment on a post? Is that really engagement, or is that passive engagement? You know, and so I think there's finding that balance between, you know, the higher numbers, the bigger reach in terms of the social media, you know, stars, but actually really the opportunity for deeper engagement. I'm not sure it's going to come from that like quick content and a piece built around the artist. It's just, you know, I think there needs to be something to kind of balance that with true engagement. I don't know, I'm really interested to hear what Andy and Lil and you think of what is engagement today?
I think it's just, engagement for me is just like a fancy way of saying, you know, becoming mates with somebody, you know, or being interested in them. And in that sense, I think, you know, you don't, like I was saying before, you don't have to go after the biggest, coolest, you know, best kind of, you know, highest number of followers, you know, that you can try and grab. It's about, you know, starting one relationship at a time. And I think if you take that approach, you find actually that there are, you know, if it is authentic, you find that there's going to be, I mean, artists are people, right? Like they're interested in lots of things. They're not just, you know, interested in music and that's all that they do. If you're not, you know, like Jake, you know, there's a kind of, we've got that connection, I think, between, you know, looking after, you know, the environment and having that responsibility of, you know, lowering our impact on the planet. And so, you know, we could have a conversation around that, something that we're both interested in, and we just start with one conversation, one person, build that relationship, you know, from an authentic starting point like that, and then go to the next one.
That's great. What do you reckon about engagement?
Look, I was actually just thinking about the fact that a brand, you know, brand is a set of intellectual property rights. An artist has you know, personality rights, copyright, intellectual property rights, and they're both businesses. And I think connecting at that level, that an artist is running a business, a brand is running a business, they both have a set of principles that they're following. If those align, and if those alignments can be found, then naturally you're going to have engagement in the space. And if you create, on top of that, you're creating a really cool idea, something that's, you know, really funny or really interactive, then you're going to get engagement. You're going to get people talking and be culturally relevant. And yeah.
And do you feel like brands then, like, say they wanted to go into a whole bunch of different communities, would they kind of cater their message to a different audience? Like if they were speaking to electronic artists as opposed to like big rock artists, do you think they take a different kind of approach in the way they're doing it, or is it all about actually being as true to what they actually stand for as possible, so it can work in every single sort of community?
I think you can change your leaves, but your roots have to stay the same. So you can have
That's a good one.
the same kind of, you got to have the same values. You can't just chop and change, you know, say like, oh, today we care about the environment, tomorrow we care about making money. I think you've got to keep those fundamentals intact. But I think you're naturally going to, you know, want to speak the language of the group that you're, like, you know, trying to kind of connect with at any time, just like you would if you're speaking to somebody at a party. You know, you're going to talk to what they're interested in, not just what you want to talk about.
Yeah, cool.
I like that.
Good tree analogy.
Yeah, I love that tree analogy.
It's not mine, I stole it.
You could have claimed it. Great. So I wanted to talk a bit I've actually just forgotten my question there for a moment, guys, so give me 1 second of how I want to phrase it. I've lost it. Let me go back to my bit of paper for a second. Okay, so what do you think that artists can actually do? You know, is it artists that actually have strong values that are easy to kind of identify that might end up being able to find brands that have strong messages that are easy to identify as well? Like, do you think it's an advantage to be an artist that says, hey, I'm a vegan artist, or we're into this, or we're into that, or mental health's our big thing, because it's easier to find some kind of alignment with you know, installations or anything like that?
I'll jump in here. I think there's definitely an access problem with artists that, you know, to actually be able to connect and have the opportunity to communicate what their values are to a brand that may have aligned values. And I think the American Express Music Backers Program is a really great example of kind of opening that door, which I think you got one of those grants as well as a few other projects of artists that I know got them as well, which was really great because they had the opportunity to kind of put in a pretty easy application, express a little bit about their personality, what they stood for, what this project meant to them. And I think it would be really great for more brands to operate in that way. It's almost like, again, drawing that line between public funding and private funding. It's almost like, I can't believe I'm saying this, but brands almost behaving a little bit more like governments in terms of having a pool of money that is kind of open in a competitive round as such, so that you can actually draw out, like, where are those really amazing artists in grassroots communities that we won't know about unless we have a Lil or a manager or someone that knows us. So I think that access thing is really, really important.
I think brands really need to think about the communities that they benefit from as well, and start there, because, you know, for example, you know, beer and hospitality benefits so much from music. So any brand that is playing in that world, in that space, you know, it's almost, I think, it should be a requirement for them. You know, they should be reinvesting into those communities that they benefit from.
Great.
One of the things we do as part of pitching artists and artist services to brands is working or focusing on editorial opportunities that are outside the you know, cycle editorial opportunities. So, and those things highlight an artist's passion points, and so that's sort of a platform that we can use to talk about their passion points, and therefore brands see them and see what they love and what they're passionate about. You know, and you know, that's one way that we try to highlight those.
So linking basically a media outlet with a brand and an artist to try and tell
Correct.
the story in a more succinct way, I guess, than just an Instagram ad or a poster or a billboard or something.
Exactly.
That's really great.
Yeah.
I was interested in what you were saying about, like, brands that can kind of help you know, artists in certain ways, and there's the example of Isolade. So, you know, back in about this time last year, artists didn't have many ways to get exposure for their performances and stuff. So what attracted Heaps Normal to be able to sponsor the Isolade events and help artists get that exposure?
What attracted us, it was sort of, again, what I was saying before. You know, we knew Emily. She's a good mate of a few of us who have been involved in Heaps Normal, and so you know, I'd reached out to her personally even before we started Heaps Normal, and spoke to her about, you know, how I could help what she was doing. And then, so it was just a natural progression when we did launch Heaps Normal to look for ways that Heaps Normal could continue that relationship as a brand and not just as a human. And so, yeah, we did that, and we've been supporting them in a very small way, to be fair. You know, we were a startup company, so we're not sort of throwing heaps of cash around, but we're just looking for ways that we could, you know, authentically support what they were doing and not just try to, you know, come in and own the show. And so but that relationship has grown, and we're actually in a couple of weeks from now about to drop our very first collaboration beer with Isolade, and Black Hearts and Sparrows. So it's a big sort of Victorian
I think
love-in.
this was an announcement, wasn't it? Yeah, this is an exclusive.
Yeah, we just
guys.
decided now it's a good time to announce it.
Cue the video.
No, what better time to announce it, I reckon? Because, I mean, Emily's such a champion of, like, Victorian music, and we're in Melbourne, and you know, and Isolade has been such a huge part of artists getting through the last 12 months, and you know, she's been kind of curating original artist lineups every week for the last 53 weeks. or something like that. So.
Wow.
Well, props to her for that. It's a really good platform there. I thought before we go to Q&A, I'd just leave with a question around just any advice that you have, either to brands or to artists, like on either side, about just like, what they can do to make themselves, connect a little bit more with each other, or how they can just do a little bit better with all of that. Feel free to jump in, anyone. But
I'll jump in. I think, as Jake mentioned earlier, just find your passion points. Things you are passionate about, maybe a cool documentary or a philanthropic project, or you're engaging with brands every single day. You're eating, you're drinking, you're wearing, so find those passion points where you can naturally align with.
I've just got one for what I'd love to see more in the brand and even the agency space. I guess I'd love to see more we're seeing it, but I'd love to see more music specialists, and they're almost helping to consult on A&R to kind of keep feeding them through. It's something I think the sports industry does really, really well. If you look at how the surf industry works, and tennis and most sports, they have of course they sponsor their kind of bigger champions or stars, but they also back a rookie. They always back someone at a very, very early stage, and they're like, this surfer or this tennis player may not be very big now, but in 8 years' time, they absolutely will be, and they're a part of that journey from the absolute, starting point. And I think that would be great to see more of that in the world of music and brands.
And then, from the artist and the passion point, good saying with when you're writing, even in movies or film clips, write what you know, and in the same way as an artist, speak to what feels authentic. What is your voice, and have to just trust as well that the brands and the right relationships will birth out of that, because it's real and it's authentic. Have to really trust it, and that's a difference between selling out with a product or someone actually buying into your vision. It changes the whole thing because it's authentic to you. So for artists, if you don't know what that is, I would say mission and vision, like coming back to those core, what are those ethics, what are those roots? The leaves are going to come, and it'll be seasonal.
that's awesome.
I think pick whether it's a musician or any other kind of artist, any kind of collaboration, pick someone that you share a message with and let the message come through. Don't try and make the logo bigger. I think get out of the way, pick an artist that you share a message with, and then get out of the way and let them do their thing. But don't sort of come in and try and bend the artist to your brand, because I think that's the recipe for a really shit collaboration.
Yeah, we've seen heaps of that.
Awesome. That's a really good place to finish up our discussion. Might pass to the funny business guys now for a Q&A session.
Perfect. Thanks, Luke. Hey, some questions have come through from the audience. I think Locke's going to kick us off with the first one.
Yeah, first question for the panel. Do you feel that brands are too focused on big names and big numbers?
100%.
Yeah. Oh, solid answer there.
Yeah, I think that's why I was talking about, don't go after the biggest number of fans, because I think that's the default reaction for a lot of brands. Is like, oh, how do we get the biggest reach? Whereas I think, like we've seen with 8,000 person niche music festivals, you can find a really powerful niche, and there's enough people these days that you can connect with, especially with the help of digital channels. You don't need to go like mass. You can find your people, and you can find enough people to make it worth your while.
And I guess you've got to ask, I think there's a balance between those two worlds, but I think you've also got to ask, what impact are you actually getting as a brand with those kind of little wham bam moments with those really big artists with huge numbers? It's like, I'll do a story or I'll put it on my feed and then I might delete it a month later. What is that actually doing for the brand?
In a world of data though, is there any metric that we can use to show that this is actually real engagement as opposed to just using likes, clicks, shares, all those kinds of things, impressions? Is there any other data points that you'll often throw at people to show?
I think that's the kind of, I think you'll see that really play out in the experience economy. Yeah.
Okay.
Connection, looking for connection.
Perfect. Next question coming through. Why do you think the brand should invest in the smaller movers and shakers within the Australian music scene?
Because they're moving and shaking.
Moving and shaking.
I guess it really would depend on what the brand's trying to achieve and what kind of brand are they trying to build. they certainly, if the values are aligned, if there's a complementary thing between the artist and the brand, they're getting an opportunity to be a part of a journey with an artist. So there's multiple touch points in which to kind of get around an artist's narrative and actually be a part of that story as well. They're probably getting more bang for their buck in terms of financial investment. And let's be real, the past year's shown the fragility of artists and musicians, and particularly those in the live music sector. So they're actually, contributing to recovery and sustainability of an artist's career.
I think maybe an example outside of straight kind of commercial brands is we always used to talk at Triple J about bands like Powderfinger or Hilltop Hoods, where they started with Triple J. Triple J went on that journey with them, and you compare that to the sort of benefit that other commercial stations might get out of jumping onto those bands a bit later in their career, and it's just not the same. Like Triple J they'll always be a Triple J band because Triple J went with them from the very beginning.
I love that. That's absolutely true. And as a result, you get artists that are absolutely massive that'll still come back and do a version that'll still go and do the smallest thing or rap the weather or whatever, because they got the initial exposure out of them. That's a really good example there.
Yeah, I know Lukey Boy touched on it before, but question 3, what sort of engagement can we expect to see within these non-mainstream communities?
Gosh, it depends on. That's a good one. I mean, that's my question of what does engagement actually mean? I mean, those kinds of communities. I think COVID as well is it's almost become like things did shrink back, and has it almost become that people actually what they missed so much was human connection. So there's a really amazing opportunity in that experience space to do something that's small. It may not be 8,000, it may not be 20,000. Do something smaller, but it's kind of building that on-ground connection with the fans. And that to me is the greatest opportunity for engagement.
100%. I mean, sorry, I feel like someone else to jump in, but I think for me, engagement is, if you're going to engage with those smaller communities, regardless, you want to build something, you actually want to create something of value. Engagement isn't just sort of putting out a message out there of something that you want to say. It's actually kind of, creating something of value that, that scratches an itch for the community that it's for, or it solves a problem for the world. I think Jake's example of, the documentary and, is a great one. Collaborating with brands on a project like that's actually got a purpose behind it, as opposed to just doing it for the sake of it.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Jake and I had a bit of a conversation before talking about just Sea Shepherd and the success that they've had, especially in the kind of rock scene. And part of it's the branding, but part of it's what they've been able to do. What do you think they're doing right to be able to get this sort of audience so on board with what they do? Apart from a great message, obviously, but there's so many other charities out there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the great message. The message supports the fan because it's for a better Earth, whether it's the oceans, cleaning up marine debris. That's number one. Aside from that, being at the shows in the physical, having a little merch or a stand to have that direct connection with the fan, talk to them about an issue, and again, the fan being able to buy something of Sea Shepherd and wear that with pride. So they're really good at that on-ground DIY grassroots, and those are those real connections that speak so much louder than just a socials post. It really ripples outwards, and that's why I think the heavy music community is so strong from all those shows in those little places that have now grown to big festivals. The underground is now in the mainstream. And there's a lot of power there because it's so heavy and it's so loud. It's speaking about the heavy issues. It's not afraid to.
Yeah. Some of the engagement, I guess, that comes from that is people wearing the T-shirt, the sticker on the back of a car, that kind of thing as well. So, I think that's the kind of engagement they can expect.
And there absolutely is data and analysis to show that you can see a spike in the chain. Perhaps it's selling more product or whatever else that the brand is trying to promote. There is data available that shows that there is a spike after after a particular campaign or activity, and that kind of gets taken for granted. We already know that there are metrics, there is engagement, there's ticket sales, there's Instagram and social media back-end data that's available, and we monitor that, and then we can show that even if the numbers are small, the spike is really important. That jump, so you know that it has worked even with the numbers.
Awesome. Yeah, it's great. Just brands that really empower fans and the community, whether it's rebuilding something or supporting the biggest supporter of that by, it's really important. Empowering the fan, empowering the individual, because they'll want to support that. It's just huge. That engagement goes tenfold.
Yeah, a really big metric, I reckon, is what do people say about your brand when you're not in the room?
Totally.
Yeah.
Like how do you put a price on that? People might say, oh yeah, I really love, I love your brand or I love your product or whatever. But if they then, what are they actually saying to their mates when, they're just together hanging out,
I like your beer, but it doesn't get me drunk. Something like that.
It's exactly what they're saying.
The things I would